Well, did you do it? Did you get all of your candy cane lane blocks done? All those so cute blocks. So what should we do next? Maybe something with all of these? Hey Kimberbell friends, Kristen Som here, and tell me, did you get them all done? All of those super cute blocks? Well, that means that it's time for us to sew them together, and then we're going to move on and we're going to do the borders. We'll do the inner and the outer borders, so we will need all of these patchwork pieces and that big long teal piece. And so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is you take your teal fabric and back it with fusible stabilizer. I'm using the Kimberbell fusible backing, and you want to back your entire piece of teal fabric. You can do it separately or together. I did the whole thing since we're going to use most of it. And then once you have that all fused with backing, then you want to cut it. And we want 2 strips that are 1.5 by 38.5. 1.5 by 38.5. Okay, so now that you have your 2 strips, 1.5 by 38.5, and don't forget they're backed with fusible stabilizer. And like I mentioned, you can do the whole strip like I did, that was in our fabric kit, and use the fusible stabilizer on it that way, or you can wait and cut them first and then add fusible stabilizer, whatever works for you. I found it easier to use the larger piece, but you will have a little extra left over, so totally up to you. But before we can use these 2 teal strips of our inner borders, we first have to sew together all of our blocks. So let's go ahead and start on that. Okay, once we have all of our blocks sewn together, then it says in the directions to iron open this, it says to iron the seams. It doesn't say what way, so I just did mine open. Do what works for you, but I did iron open all of my seams. So once you have it all together in the right order with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, make sure to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance for each block, then everything will fit together right. Then we're going to get our white glitter snow vinyl. So this comes in a big long strip in our embellishment kit, and just like the other glitters, you want to take off that topping before we sew it on. And we are going to sew it with the bottom edge of the snow against the bottom edge of our blocks. So right from one side to the other, it will be a little bit longer than we need. So go ahead and just start on one side at the bottom and sew it all along the bottom. It also says to sew it along the top. Might do a cute little decorative stitch around that, I'm not sure yet. But anyway, get your glitter vinyl out of your embellishment kit and take off the topping. So one other important thing to note is when you're ironing your blocks together, not together, after your blocks are together and you're ironing open your seams, and when you're ironing your glitter, just really watch out for all of the vinyl glitter that is on your windows. Not the glitter, sorry, the vinyl on the windows, the mylar, the leather. We don't want to iron any of those. So make sure to always use a pressing cloth on these decorative items. And let's go ahead and get started with the snow, adding the snow on. That's our next step. Okay, so once you have all of the glitter snow sewn onto the bottom with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, then we are going to use the iron. Don't forget to use a pressing cloth, and we are going to just iron it in place, and then we will do a top stitch all along the top here. So for now, just get it all onto the bottom of your bench pillow at the bottom of the blocks, and then cut off those little edges, the extra. There was a little bit of extra, and then we're going to go ahead and iron it down. That's all so far. Okay, so once that you have your snow sewn on, a couple things on this. I'm not great at sewing. I'm good at embroidery, quilting, not so great with sewing. So I was going to do a cute little decorative stitch at the top of this. I thought snowflakes would be so cute. And I thought about that back and forth motion and trying to keep it on the edge, and decided that's really out of my skill set. So do what works for you. I used just a regular stitch all along the top edge of this, and it worked fine. So that's great. If you can do a cute little snowflake or something fun, go for it, for sure. So once we have this done, then it's time to start on our inner borders. So like I said, our inner borders, you want 2 strips, and they are 1.5 by 38.5. And backed with fusible stabilizer would be pretty important here. And then you're also going to have batting that equals the length. I haven't cut that yet. I'm going to show you a couple ways of doing this. So there is our usual way that we've done for candy corn quilt and Broomhilda and vintage boardwalk for our inner borders. But Kim, the owner of Kimberbell, came out with a new way that helps take away 2 steps. And that's significant, right? Especially when you're doing lots of hoopings. So I'm going to show you that way, and it's really simple. I'm also going to show you how you can merge 2 and do them at the same time. So it will cut the process in half. So that is if you have software, or if you feel comfortable doing it on your machine. I'm not sure that I would personally, but I'm going to use software, and I'm going to show you how to do it on software. It's very easy. You can definitely do each one. Don't worry about merging them, but I am going to merge them and do 2 in one hooping together, and then do the multiple hoopings. But I will show you on software how to do that, and it, like I said, it's super simple. I'm using Sew What Pro software, so let's go ahead and go to the computer. Hey everyone, I'm at my computer now, and like I mentioned, if you choose to merge your 2 pieces of inner borders into one hooping, it's really easy to do on software. So I'm going to show you how. I'm back at the computer now, and as you can see on this title bar up here, I'm using Sew What Pro software. So Sew What Pro is from S&S Computing. I think it was like $65. It's a very good deal I use it for everything. So totally optional. You can do one strip at a time and do multiple hoopings. It doesn't matter, but it will take the time in half, cut the time in half if you do 2 in one hooping. So very easy to do. So you would just go to File, Open. And I bought the design off Kimberbell this morning, and so I've already got it loaded onto my desktop. You would just point to where you've kept your design, and that's easy to do. So on this, I want to show you a little tip here. Every time that I'm going to do a border, I always check the actual size of the quilting. So for instance, this 1 by 10 is not actually 10 inches long. You can see just by clicking on it that it's 9.45 inches. And the 12 inch, if you click on that, it's not 12 inches, it's 11.73. So this is really helpful information to choose which design to use and how to fill up the entire length of the inner border. So as I mentioned, this is cut to 38.5, and we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each end. So that means that we want 38 inches of quilting, or as close to that as we can get. And generally you start like the biggest hoop, and then toward the end you measure and see how much more quilting that you need at the end, and then you adjust the size. You use a different size for that last piece. and that works great. The other thing is you can let it run off the edge onto the stabilizer and not worry about that because it's going to go into the seam allowance. So whatever works. But having the size information is really, really helpful. So like this 14 inch, if you used a 9x14 hoop, it's 13.98, which is really close to 14. So anyway, so here's what I did. So if you have 38 inches and say that you're going to use your 12-inch hoop, all right, you could fit both of yours easily in a 7x12 or an 8x12 hoop if you have that hoop size. So say that I'm going to do that. Well, I know it's 11.73, so I would take the 38 inches and divide it by 11.73, and I get 3 and something. So I could do it in 3 hoopings, but here's the deal. So if I did 3 hoopings at 11.73, then my total is 35.19. So I'm going to have 35.19 inches quilted of the 38 that I need. So I'm off by about 3 inches, which is pretty substantial. And there isn't a 3-inch size. Like I said, you could do the 1x7 and just have the extra 4 inches run off of the side onto your stabilizer, and that works totally fine. Or you can try and get something a little bit closer. So if I did the 1x10 using my 6x10 hoop, and at a 1x10, we know that it is 1x10. We know that the actual size is 9.45. The length is 9.45. So again, I would take my 38 inches and divide it by 9.45, and then I get 4, and so 4 times 9.45 is 37.8. How close is that? Like, I'll be doing that. So again, it depends on what hoop sizes that you have available. It depends on, sorry, I'm getting a call. It depends on the quilting size that you're going to use. And like I said, you can use multiple sizes because you're going to rehoop anyway, so it doesn't matter, but you just want to use a little bit of math to figure out what works best for you. So like I said, I'm going to use my 6x10 hoop. Sorry about the phone. 6x10 hoop, and I'm going to do 4 hoopings, and at 37.8, I'm super satisfied with that. That will be really close. In fact, you want to make sure to get them lined up really close, since it is such a close, so close to our overall size. And I'm going to show you how to do that. It's super easy. All right, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the 6x10. So what I would do is I'd click on that. You can see I've got it here, 1x10 border Christmas 2. That's the one I'm using. And you can use any of the borders. So it will automatically open to a 5x7 hoop. It thinks you're going to use a 5x7 hoop even though your size of quilting is a 10 inch. So we just go up to this button up here, adjust hoop size, and we're going to choose our 6x10 hoop and click OK. All right, and then you can use the shift button and the little scroll button on your mouse to zoom out, or there's a button down here that you can use to zoom out. So once you have that, we're going to just take this and move it over. It's very easy to do. You're just clicking on the whole thing, moving it over. All right, so now we've got that, and it's steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a little tip on this, I'll show you in a minute. So right now, click outside, anywhere outside the box or outside from, just to deselect this first design. And then we're going to go to File, Merge, and we're going to bring that same one in again, another 1x10. And again, it'll go right to the middle, but we're going to bring it over here. And look how easy that was. So you can see I put them on the edge just so that I have room. I don't have to worry about them overlapping or getting in the way. So we could be done here. Easy to do. But what it'll do is it will stitch this whole first one, and then it will stitch this whole second one. So it's better, if you can, to merge them so that it's doing each of the steps together. And you can see that Kimberbell has them color-coded. The first one is always our placement stitch for the batting. Number 2 is the tack down of our batting, and then we would trim. And then number 3 is the placement for the main fabric, and number 4 is the tack down or basting stitch of the main fabric, and number 5 is our quilting. And then the next steps are the same thing but for this one. So what I would do, it's so easy. If you click on one, click the shift key and move it up, you can see that now we have 1 and 2 are both our placement for our batting. All right, so we're just matching them up with the color that's already there. So we know that number 2 is our tack down of our batting and number 7 is the same. So we would click shift and move it up, and I just put them together. So now we have number 3 and number 4 are doing the same purpose. And then we're back to our placement of our main fabric, which is that blue one. So it's blue number 5 and blue number 8. So click on number 8, hit shift, and with your mouse move it up. All right, and then the same thing for number 7 and number 9. We're going to click on number 9 and easily move it up. So there, now we have them all together. You can see that number 9 and number 10 are both the actual quilting design for this, and that we want those together. There's one more step that we can do though. If we actually merge these together, edit, we would go to edit, join threads, join all adjacent threads of the same color. See, that's why we looped them together or lumped them together. So we're going to hit OK. And now we only have 5 steps. And number 1 does both of the placement for the batting, and number 2 does both of the tack down of the batting. Number 3 does both of the placement for the main fabric, and number 4 does the tack down or basting stitch for both of the strips, and number 5 is our quilting design. So that's super easy, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this here. I'm going to show you a little workaround, and so you could actually take away 2 of the steps while you're here in software, but I'm going to leave them in just for those people that are not going to use embroidery software. So I'll show you what to bypass and what not to. So right here, this is the most important part. I want to make sure to point out, you need to do a save as. If you just hit save right now, it is going to save over the file that you first brought in, which is that 1x10. So anytime you try to use a 1x10 of your border, it would be this. It would be the double. And that you might want that. But in my opinion, it's much better to always do a save as so you have that option later. So you would go to File, Save As, and then just give it a name. So I'm just going to, at the end of what it's already saying, I'm going to write double. It's double. We can spell. Oops, I'm doing it twice. All right, double. So you can name it whatever. Kristen made me do this. Here's my double of 1x10s, whatever you want to call it, but just do a save as, and that creates it so that you have, so look, if I were to open another file, you can see here's my double. Here's my regular 1x10 and here's my double, and that just makes it so that I can always use these files again in whatever way. All right, and then we're done. So then you would load it to your USB stick, bring it over to your machine, and you're good to go. And like I said, this is not a requirement. This is a nice to have. You can certainly do each one separately, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to save on steps, then here's a quick and easy way to do that. All right, that's it. Okay, I know there's some newbies doing this one that haven't quilted borders before. Don't worry, it's easy, I promise. So a couple things. Like I said, back your inner borders with fusible stabilizer. I am using Kimberbell's fusible backing. And then in my hoop, like I mentioned, I am going to use my 6x10 hoop, and I am using Kimberbell's light mesh cutaway in my hoop. And then for your quilting, you want to choose your thread. I've gone back and forth on light gray and white. I've decided on light gray for the inner borders. So I'm using this Floriani PF 434. If you did candy corn quilt with me, there is a nice light gray in that. It is Coin. It's called Coin by Glide. So whatever you choose, the white that is in our Candy Cane Lane thread kit would be great for this as well. I've decided, since I used the light gray on all of my background blocks, I'm going to do it on this inner border, but I'm thinking about using white for my outer border. Haven't decided for sure yet, but anyway, let's get started now. Like I said, I'm doing 2-in-1 hooping. You do not have to do that, but I'm going to show you the process, which will be the same whether you're doing 1 or 2. All right, let's get started. Okay, let's talk batting. So Kimberbell has a project batting that is the perfect loft. I don't have that here. I haven't tried it, but I'm sure it's great. I'm using Warm and Natural. So here's the thing. If you are using the previous method of quilting that we did on all of our previous quilts, then you would cut your batting to about 1.5 or 2 inches by the length of the design that you've chosen. So like 2 by 10 or 1.5 by 10, something like that. But we're going to try something different today. So Kim, like I said, Kim showed this in one of her recent videos. And so I'm going to try that out. And so if you're doing it this way, then you want to cut your batting to 1 inch, like the exact width of the quilting. So 1 inch by 38 inches, 1 inch by 38 inches for your batting. And then we are going to line it up just right. And we're going to go ahead and put it on before we start. So you're going to want your 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can see the 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. And you want to line up this batting. So personally, I'm not a fan of that sticky spray. I think it just gets everywhere and I'm not a fan. So I don't have that here. So I bought some stick glue. Use the spray. A lot of people really like the spray. Go for it. Or the glue, or hold it, watch it really closely. Either way, we're going to babysit it, so it really doesn't matter. But bottom line is you want to start with it already kind of adhered to this in the right position, and then I'll show you what comes next. Okay, so here is our chance to really get this lined up right. So don't rush through it. Like I said, if you're using spray, you could spray it on here, spray it on your batting. I'm not absolutely sure how that works because I don't use that. I bought this Elmer's glue. It's purple. I didn't know that, but it's disappearing ink. It's not a problem. So I am just doing a very small, very light layer of the glue stick. And then I am very carefully placing my batting, making sure that it's straight and making sure that I have equal or as close to equal on each side as I can. And then I am laying this down. All right, so you can see it's a very small amount of glue. I could easily pull it up, but you can see that this is your chance to get your batting lined up right so that you don't have batting in your seam. So you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, and this is for that new technique I told you about that Cam showed us just recently. So we're gonna give that a try, and to do that we have our batting in place to start. One other thing is, remember I said that you want this batting to be 38 inches long. That's really important. If you can see here, it is not as long as the strip. All right, I have all this extra on the strip, and that's because our strip is longer than 38 inches. Mine's, I don't know, more like 40 or so. So, and that's okay, because then if you have any runoff of the quilting, it can run off without batting. So we just want to make sure that the batting is the right size. And before you ask, I haven't done this before. I haven't done the gluing before. I haven't done this style of quilting where we're going to bypass the first 2 steps and get our batting exactly right. But I think it's a good opportunity to try it, and I think it's really important to get our batting the right location. And as far as how the glue stick works versus the spray, I don't know. Like I said, I haven't done this before, but I'm assuming it's going to gunk up the needle less, and that's my hope. And we'll see. Okay, I'm on the last bit here, and like I mentioned, mine is purple. It says that it goes on purple and dries clear, so that's all good. That should be just fine. All right, and then we are ready to get started. Okay, now as Kim showed in her video, we are going to bypass the first 2 steps. We've never done that before. This is our first time with our group. So we are going to click on your quilting design, click set, and then we are going to bypass the first two steps. After you click embroidery, it shows you that the first step is the placement stitch of our batting, and then the second is the tack down of the batting. We're going to bypass those because we already have our batting attached to our strips. So to bypass, I've shown you lots of times in lots of videos. You probably are sick of seeing it, but just in case, we go to this little up, down, plus, negative button, and then the down button. That skips the first one, and then we're going to skip the second one as well. All right, so now we are at the basting stitch. I'm sorry, the placement stitch of our main fabric. So we're going to go ahead and stitch that. I'm using a light thread and mesh cutaway, so it'll be hard to see, but you know the general idea. Okay, as you can see, hopefully you can see, light thread, but we have our placement stitch for our two strips that we have done. So we are going to take those strips and we are going to line them up within both of those two boxes. All right, we're gonna, so if you did two, let me grab my Kimberbell tape. If you did two strips, then you'll see both boxes. But if you're just doing one, it would be right in the middle of your hoop, and that is perfectly fine. And I am going to get it right in that box, and I'm going to tape just a tiny bit to hold it down. This would be a lot easier if you remove the hoop first, which I am going to do. I'm tape it in place. Hold on. Okay, so I put a little piece of tape up at the top, and then I also put tape across the bottom because you can see that the box ends here. It's not going to go over that tape. And then, like I said, I'm doing 2-in-1 hooping, so I would just do the same to the second one. And you just really want to get it lined up just right within that the placement box that they've given us. All right, so once those are all ready, you're going to put your hoop back in, and it's going to do a basting stitch of both of these down the sides. Make sure you don't have any little bubbles. Okay, hopefully you can see we have a nice basting stitch along the edge of both of our strips, and now it's going to do the quilting. Okay, we have our quilting on both strips done. So pretty and so cute. My machine was crazy fast. Is your machine that fast? I'm just kidding. I sped it up in video editing. All right, so now we're going to remove the tape, remove the stabilizer, and re-hoop, and I'll show you the tip on that. Okay, remove all your stabilizer, and then look at how perfectly these are. So we've got our 1/4-inch seam allowance on each side. This is all really good. So one thing that I would do differently is on the tops, on the beginning, I would leave a little extra, because I think we're probably going to need a 1/4-inch seam allowance. It doesn't say that. I haven't read ahead, I guess. But I would think we need a 1/4-inch seam allowance. So I did put mine down just a tiny bit. I don't know if you can see that. So as long as the batting's not there, it doesn't matter. But you can see my first little leaf. I should have, I think, put this above the that first placement box. That's one thing I would do differently, is move this up just a bit, but since my batting's not in the seam, it really doesn't matter at all, and that part's just going to go into the seam allowance, so it literally doesn't matter at all. All right, so now here's the key. When we are going to do the placement stitch for the second hooping, and you can see on your strip where your stabilizer ends, and we're going to use that to line up. So even though the batting continues throughout, you can still see that little bit of space. See right there where the stabilizer ends? That's what we're going to use to line up our second hooping, so that it all just flows very nicely. All right, let's go ahead and start on our second hooping. Okay, once we have our first two strips done and the stabilizer taken off, the extra stabilizer taken off, then we're going to run through that process again. Now don't forget that we're going to bypass those first two steps, because we don't need them. We have our batting already attached. So we are just going to go to that plus minus and then go down and down. And we're going to be on step number 3. Okay, once you have the first two placement stitches for each of the strips, or one if you're doing one strip at a time, you're gonna, in the directions, it tells you in the, what is it, the quilting design directions, it tells you to roll a piece of tape, and you're gonna put it at the top here. You can definitely do that. It will help hold down the area that we've already quilted. Since we've already quilted it, another option is just to put a larger piece of tape across the top. So I'll show you both ways. So this is the important thing though, and I recommend taking this off and putting it on a flat surface to get it lined up right. You are going to line up from the previous stabilizer, from the previous hooping, you're going to line that up with the top of the next hooping. So I'm probably going to do it just to show you, and then take it off the machine so I can line it up just right. But you can see I've got it pushed back here, and there's my excess stabilizer right there, and I'm just going to line that up with the top of the placement stitch, and then I'm going to fold that back. And since I have that little piece of tape there, it's going to hold it in place enough for me to get it lined up just right within that basting box. So there's my basting box, and I want to just get the whole thing lined up just right. And you could put another piece of tape, that rolled tape, down there at the bottom, or you can just put it a larger piece at the bottom, because it's not going to quilt down there anyway. So like I said, you could do that rolled tape up at the top there. It will hold just fine. Or the other option is to get it lined up just right where you want it, and then lay a larger piece of tape across this top part that's already quilted. Sorry, probably can't see that. Along here, along the top part that's already quilted, because it's not going to go up there. So let me make sure I've got this all lined up just right, and then I'll come back. Okay, so as you can see, I have it lined up within the placement stitch on both strips. You just really want to make sure that that's just right. Don't rush through this part. And then you can do that rolled tape at the bottom and the top and the bottom if you prefer, or just a piece of tape over the part that's not going to be quilted anyway. You can see from your placement stitch box where the quilting is going to be, so you know it's not going to go up there. So either way works. But get your strips lined up just right within that stitch box. I don't know if you can see that, it's under there, but just get it lined up just right. And then we're going to run through steps 4 and 5, which is the tack down, basting stitch, and the actual quilting. Now don't forget, when you're putting this back in your machine, you want to be absolutely sure that the strips, the extra strips from the bottom and from the top, are not underneath your hoop. You want to make sure that those are all clear, and then we're ready to go. Okay, now we have the basting stitch holding both of those in place, and you can see it lines up right with our previous quilting, so it's going to be great. All right, and then we're going to run the last stitch, which is the quilting design. Okay, and that's done, and wow. You can't even see where one quilting design stops and one begins. It is just seamless. They are absolutely perfectly placed. So we're going to do that again 2 more times. Oh, there, now you can see. Look at that. I mean, it literally does not show where one started and one started. So anyway, now we're going to do that 2 more times for a total of 4 hoopings. If you're doing it twice, then it would be 8 hoopings. So 4 hoopings per strip, if depending on your hoop size and if you're using the same math method that I did as far as figuring out what fit well in the hoops. So let's get going. Okay, step number 3, and I just want to give you a quick reminder to bypass those first 2 steps so that you're starting on number 3. All right, same thing as before, run the placement stitch, put down your strips and line it up just right within that placement stitch, and then tape it down and run the quilting design. All right, remember at the very beginning I said that if it were me and I weren't following the directions exactly, that instead of putting the top of the strip into the box, I would put it over the top just a little bit so that there'd be a little bit of room. And it doesn't matter because my batting had a little bit of room, but that's what I would have done and would recommend. And it's funny that I said that because if I had done that, my quilting would have been exact. Like just a little, look at, I've got like 1/8 of an inch that won't be quilted, and that is perfectly fine. What I'll probably end up doing is cutting off that batting because this is the strip that's all quilted, and this is extra. So I didn't remember, I said that it's 1.5 by 38.5, and I hadn't cut mine down. This is just the strip that was in our fabric kit. So it actually will be right about there that will finish. I'm sorry, not there. That's I had it, there it is. So right about there. So I'll have my 1/4 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut that tiny little bit of batting out of the way, and then I've got a little bit more than 1/4 inch. And like I said, if I had centered it where I had brought this down a little bit, see, you can see that the quilting started right at the top because I was at the inside of that box, and if I had just put the fabric over the box just a little to the left of the box, then it would have not been right at the top there. So anyway, this worked out so perfectly. So look at how fun is that. Got quilting all the way down. It was 4 hoopings doing 2 strips, and they came out just perfectly. And we've got our batting right where it's supposed to be, and our 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way. And we didn't have to on off with the hoop and trim the batting. We started with the batting at exactly the size that we needed. And that was a really great suggestion that Kim had, that she came up with a new way of doing it, and it worked so perfectly. And golly, you just really can't even see where one quilting design starts and where one ends. You can see on the back because the stabilizer ends, but on the front, look at that. It's just seamless where it starts, where it ends. You can't tell. So we're done. That's the inner borders. So now we are just going to sew these on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the top and the bottom, and we are done with our inner borders. Okay, one more little tip. So on our inner borders, there's that basting stitch on the top and the bottom. If you don't take those out, make sure that you're sewing with a full 1/4 inch seam allowance, or you'll see those little basting stitches. Ask me how I know. So I redid mine a little bit in the parts where I could see a little bit of the basting stitches in here. So totally up to you whether you leave them in or take them out, but if you do leave them in, just make sure that when you're sewing it together that you're all full 1/4 inch seam allowance, maybe even the tiniest bit over that, just to make sure that that basting stitch isn't showing on the outside. That's all. Or just take the basting stitches out. You can see I took a few out on the next part, but totally optional, just that small little tip. All right, so sew the top and bottom. I've only got the top on so far, but both of these, and then you're done with your inner borders. And there we have it. I can't wait to see yours. And my shirt today is by Itch to Stitch. Super cute little gingerbread boy and girl in love. So don't forget to share photos of your project in the Kristen Creates group. And I look forward to seeing them and sharing them in the next tutorial.